Hi, so I'm Sue. I've been coming to this church for about 5.5 years now. I'm a trustee. I co-lead one of the small groups with Anne Rayner. And you sometimes find me out the front here on the Bible reading rota or the prayer rota. And when I was asked ages ago, would I do one of these talks, I was like, yeah, fine, no problem. And then when I sat down to try and write it, I thought, well, I just am a Christian, that's it. So that's the end of my talk. And I realised there'd be some in the congregation who'll probably be thinking, yes, we always like a speaker who's brief, that's good. but probably I'm not fulfilling the requirements. So I realised that reality is not quite so simple, and so that's the story that I need to share with you. In the words of a famous 21st century philosopher, well, I say philosopher, you might call him a boy band member or a one-show presenter, but Ronan Keating had a hit in July 2000 which was called Life is a Roller Coaster. And I think that's quite apt, and I can say that of my life. And I don't know a lot of your stories out there in the congregation, but I know a lot of you, I know little snippets of a lot of your stories, and I think a lot of you, and I think probably everybody, is on their own unique roller coaster as they go through life. What I know is, in the seat next to me, in my roller coaster, is God. And I know he's there because he told me that once. I'll come back to that a bit later in the story. We need to get to that point. So, starting back at the beginning, as seems traditional in these talks, I was born in Southend-on-Sea, but technically in Rochford, because that's where the maternity unit was at that time. But that's where I was born. We lived in Windermere Road in Southend, near the Sacred Heart Church. I was christened in St Mark's in Westcliff. That's where my mum and dad were attending church at that time. And then when I was about 2, Dad had his first epileptic fit. And Dad suffered with epilepsy for the rest of his life. And I say suffered deliberately because he lost his beloved job, which was as a train driver, and he couldn't work. And he was angry his whole life, wanting to understand why him. We moved churches a lot during my childhood. I understood as a small child that my dad was searching for those answers. And we would move when he ran out of arguments with the various clergy at the churches we were at. And it was whilst we were attending United Reformed Church up on Bournemouth Park Road that I started going to Girls' Brigade, like Chris shared last week with Boys' Brigade. I started Girls' Brigade at Bellevue Baptist Church. It was just round the corner from where we lived, and all my friends were going there, so I wanted to be there as well. And back in those days, there were parade services quite regularly, so I was having to go quite regularly on a Sunday to be there for parade, and Mum and Dad would come along to those services as well. And so we transitioned, and as a family, we were at Bellevue Baptist Church. And that is where we stayed. And I don't think Reverend Alan Cox there ever gave my dad answers that my dad was satisfied with, but they carried on debating through the time. Reverend Alan Cox, he supported my mum, he encouraged me, and that's where I was. And I attended Sunday school there until I was around about 16-ish, and then I sort of drifted away. I didn't find the transition from being in Sunday school to being in church very easy at all. I don't think there weren't youth, pastors and youth workers probably to the extent there are these days. And that's my first shout out this morning to anyone who gets involved in youth work. It's really valuable because I think it's one of those difficult times when people transition, and so it's such a valuable service that you're providing, so do keep going with that. So I sort of drifted away. I went off to university. I never settled with any church whilst I was there. I finished, I got a job, and I was down in Portsmouth, and I didn't go to church there either. And by the way, all the way through my life, I would pray, and I believed there was a God. If I'd been asked if I was a Christian, I'm not sure what I would have said as an answer, to be truthful. In 2000, I had a promotion at work, and I needed to move to Stevenage in Hertfordshire to work, and I bought a house in a small town called Biggleswade, a bit further up the A1 from Stevenage. My rationale for buying that house wasn't very sophisticated, to be honest. I'd been renting in Portsmouth. I was a bit scared of getting involved in a chain for the purchase. And so I found Biggleswade where they were building brand new houses, so there was no chain. So that's where I bought a house, and that's where I moved. Biggleswade is a small market town, and anytime I walked from my home to the centre of town, I would walk past the local Baptist church. And I would always think, I really ought to go one Sunday. I ought to go to a service, but I didn't. Then one day, a leaflet came through my door, and I picked it up. And I had this immediate sense of this enormous foam finger coming out of the sky and poking me, prodding me. It was an invitation to an Alpha course at that church. I felt challenged. I felt that I had to go and join that Alpha course. So I did. I joined up, I attended. I felt comfortable straight away. I felt familiar in the church environment. I remembered the Bible stories from Sunday school. I already believed in God, so it was great. And during the duration, the Alpha course lasts over many weeks. There was one weekday, and for work, I needed to go into London. So I went in on the train and I stepped on the escalator to go down on the tube. And I don't know why, but I was feeling a bit grumpy that day. I was like, I didn't want to be there. I was a bit... And there was no one else around. I was just on this escalator as it trundled down, one of the deep ones. And suddenly I heard a voice say to me, haven't you realised yet that I've been with you every step of every day? And it was one of those light bulb moments. David was asking last week about encounters with God, and I didn't put my hands up because it was kind of spoil the punchline of my talk today if I did, so I didn't share it. But there was no one else around. I have absolutely no doubt that God spoke to me. Okay, that was an escalator, not a roller coaster, but there's, it's close-ish, isn't it? So there I was. I finished Alpha. I was baptised, I became a member of that church. I grew strongly in my faith there in Biggleswade. And having given the shout out for youth work earlier, this is the point where I say, any of you who get involved in Alpha whenever it's run, again, it's a brilliant way to connect people and God together. So, it's been a rich blessing in my life, and I know in many lives, so thank you for that. So, I believe that you only get out of church or life what you put into it. So I got involved. I was part of a small group. I taught in Sunday school. I helped out at Alpha. Would have been rude not to, wouldn't it, really, under the circumstances. I even led some services occasionally, standing out the front. And I was a deacon. I had a strong sense that I had really deep roots in that church and that community. So life was pretty good. Church life was going well. Job was going well. The one aspect that was missing for me was that life partner, in my case, a husband. I prayed to meet a Christian man that I could settle down with and grow in faith with. And over time, I dated various guys, never the right person, until I did meet the right person. We met through online dating. He lived in Lancashire. For a year, we conducted a long-distance relationship, one of us travelling each weekend, so we would see each other. He proposed, I accepted. We got married, and I moved a long way north to Lancashire to start a new life. I gladly tore up those deep roots I had in Biggleswade for my future in this life partnership. 10 months after we got married, my husband walked out of our marriage. I found myself hundreds of miles away from friends or family. It became very clear very quickly the marriage was definitely over. I was in an unfamiliar place, and I was mourning for the loss of my future. God got me through those months, obviously. I decided I needed to move back south, and I thought probably it was time to move back to Southend-on-Sea, where I hadn't lived since I was, early 20s. Dad had died many years earlier, but Mum was still here, and she was going to be getting older, so she'd probably want a bit more help. And my sister and brother-in-law had 2 small children, and there's no other family nearby, so, I'd be helpful as a babysitter from time to time as well. So I moved back to Southend. I did a bit of online research around the churches, and I thought I would try Shoebury and Thorpe Bay Baptist Church. It seemed quite similar to the church where I'd grown up. The first time I walked in, Elizabeth Stoner was somewhere near the back, and she didn't recognise me, but she spotted me, and she asked if I was new, and she kind of, gathered me to sit with her and welcomed me. And that's just brilliant. Again, for any of you who have that gift, it's not a gift I have, but if you have that gift to spot someone new who's feeling a bit lost when they walk in, that gift to kind of gather them up and make them feel welcome, it's wonderful. Do exercise it regularly. So I became a member here about 5 years ago. I remember my membership interview, Janet's smiling, with Janet and David. And Janet asked me a very fair question about whether I was angry with God about the failure of my marriage. And I said, no, I don't blame God for that. We've all got free will. And I know we'll all face challenges in life. But being very honest with you this morning, recently, I have been quite angry with God. And I did debate whether I should do this talk this morning. But funnily enough, I was sitting over lunch with a work colleague a few weeks ago. Happens to be a Sikh. Not relevant, but he happens to be Sikh. And we were talking about dementia, as my mum has dementia, and faith. And I shared with him that I was thinking of pulling out of doing this talk. And he told me, no, you've got something today that you're meant to be telling people. So I hope that's okay, that's what I'm sharing this morning. So I have been blessed to spend time with Mum over the last 6 years, a lot more time than I would have spent if I'd lived away from Southend. Last November, she was diagnosed with dementia. It's taken hold of her fairly fast. She's now bedbound. She doesn't recognise me or my sister very often. And she's often scared. And she's often frustrated, and she's often angry. 6 months ago, I could read her daily Bible reading to her from her Daily Bread Bible notes, and I could pray with her the prayer that it suggested at the end. And she would join in with the Amen, but she doesn't understand the words anymore. She's moved on from that. But I can still get through to her sometimes by playing her favourite worship song to her. And I see her calm down and maybe a little bit of connection. So, I'm having a lot of angry prayer chats with God right now regarding Mum's situation. My mum, a quiet, gentle, shy lady who's been a faithful Christian her whole life. She's now this helpless, scared, angry person. I don't know how I could cope with supporting Mum if I didn't know that I had God right beside me every step of the way, even though I'm still shouting at him as to why does Mum have to endure so much suffering. So this is my story. This is my roller coaster ride so far. And as I said, I don't know how I could do each step without God right there with me. And I decided to give Mum the final word this morning. I mentioned her favourite worship song. It's a bit old school these days, but it's What a Friend We Have in Jesus. I'm not going to go through all the lyrics, I haven't got time, and you certainly wouldn't want me to sing out loud. But it's a continuous reminder to take everything, bring everything to God in prayer. And the final lyrics tell you that that's where you will find solace. Thank you.